Have joining me via Skype, public finance and policy analyst Olusegun Elemo. Thank you very much for joining me this morning. So let's look at the composition of the team. When you first heard the story of the composition of the economic team, what was your mindset at the point?
Well, first I want to say thank you for having me join you this morning on the breakfast show. When I heard personally, I felt finally the president has taken the very much desired decision by the country at large. And looking at the team, like you said, these are very renowned economists, global quality. And the question would be that, why has government not taken this kind of decision in the past, bringing private sector experience to managing the economy? And, when you look at the profile of the people there, again, people like Professor, Doyin Salami, I've been under his tutoring a couple of times. Of course, Bismarck Riwane, and Professor Chukwuma Soludo, who incidentally is former, central bank governor. And then you could see, he has these people have some track record. So the team is fantastic. But the question would be, why is this decision coming at this very time? Why not early?
Okay, well, but it's better late than never, actually. But looking at the team now, what do you think should be their focus at this point?
I think the mandate is clear. They are supposed to advise the president, and they report directly to the president on economic policy matters, on fiscal analysis, on economic growth, on internal and global economic issues. But for me, I'm just thinking, when you look at the current indices, look at the GDP growth rate at 2.85%, look at the annual GDP growth rate at 1.94%, you look at the unemployment rising at 23.1%, you look at inflation at 11%, you look at interest rates, which the central bank recently held at 13.5%, and the cash reserve ratio at 22.5%. All of these put together, you want to see an economic advisory council that is very objective. Okay. And the limitation, is that there is not a constitutional committee, so they can only advise the president, and the president is not under any obligation to yield.
But that's a concern at this point, and it will bring to question the reason for the composition of the team if the president is not obliged to listen to them or to take their suggestions.
Yeah, exactly. They are not a constitutional committee. They don't have any recognition in the constitution. It's not a permanent committee. Any one of them or the entire group can be sacked at any time. Okay. The only positive about this is that it's an independent committee that should be very, very objective. And I think they will do their job. They cannot force the president to do anything. But I think the president also taking this decision at this time knows and realizes that the responsibility of getting Nigerians out of poverty, like he mentioned during his inauguration speech, lies solely on his shoulders. And, many people have always been absolving the president of some of these economic issues. But I think, going forward now, he will now take full responsibility as to what happens to the economy. And I think what the mandate before the advisory council now would be that the country, the growth that the country experiences also reflects in the lives and experiences of the people on the street.
All right, public finance analyst Olusegun Elemo, thank you so much for talking to us.
Policy analyst Olusegun Elemo, thank you for joining us on TVC Breakfast.
All right. Thank you for having me.
Mixed reactions have trailed this team put up by the president, and that one of the worries is the fact that since this team is not backed by law, is there much they can do to change or to bring the economy from its brink?
Yeah, thank you once again for having me on the breakfast show. I think it's clear the role of the council is basically advisory. They cannot mandate the president to yield to whatever it is they're recommending. I think it was a former president of this country who was referring to his advisor at the time, that the advisor can only advise, and he's under obligation to weigh such advices and yield to what he feels is best. So the same for this advisory council. They can only advise, and then the president will have, it's at liberty to either yield or not. Like I mentioned, it's a non-constitutional council. It's also in consonance with what happens in other parts of the country, including the United States of America. So also of course, other parts of the world, it's not a constitution. They don't have constitutional power. They can only advise the president on what to do, what they feel is best. But the gains here is that most of the council members are, private sector, experts on their own, including the former central bank governor, Professor Charles Soludo, and then the chairman of this council, Professor Doyin Salami, of whom I've been under tutoring a couple of times, and I've heard him speak. And these are quality economists, if you ask me.
All right, now let's look at the makeup, like you have mentioned, persons who are, vast in the areas of the private sector. And one of the issues that have been bothering a lot of Nigerians is the aspect of the ease of doing business in the country. How would you want them to advise the president on this issue?
I think they have first-hand experiences or as to the environment, the business environment in the country as we speak. Many people who, especially the small-scale businesses, they are complaining that the bureaucracy around, for instance, the registration and also the post-incorporation activities of SMEs, it's cumbersome. And if you want to grow the economy, you can't rely on multinationals to grow the economy. You must rely on the smaller businesses, on the young people who are doing smaller businesses, and then pull all of these energies together to grow the economy. Because the economy is not going to grow because you have two multinationals or two telecom giants. No, you are going to grow the economy because you have thousands and millions of small-scale businesses. And if you don't provide the necessary environment for them to grow, then you cannot experience the growth that you so desire. And mind you, like I mentioned earlier, the growth rate right now is at 2.85%. The annual growth rate is at 1.94%. The unemployment is at 23%. It's alarming. The inflation rate is 11, is double digits. We're looking at something that can come to a single digit inflation rate. The interest rate is held at 13.5%. How do you expect small and medium enterprises to borrow? And then mind you, of course, banks are not even lending to these small businesses. So those are key areas you expect the council to now begin to review and advise the president on what to do. And again, the price of crude right now is at $70. So you expect them to leverage on the price of crude that is high right now, because the benchmark, which on the budget, I think is $60. So you have something that is an environment that is somewhat favorable for you to do your work. So you just expect.
One last question before we let you go. This commission is being set up after the signing of the Africa Free Trade Agreement, like you know. So that is another aspect that people or economists and experts are wondering how this council could perhaps explore to advise the government on best ways that will be beneficial to the country.
Yes, I also expect them to look into this issue. At first, Nigeria was reluctant to signing this agreement, but now we're happy that Nigeria, of course, has seen that they cannot afford to be isolated from the rest of Africa. So, and these are top business, men and women who's operated successful business in the private sector. So I expect them to also look at how Nigeria can now utilize this agreement to foster Nigerian businesses across, across the continent.
Olusegun Elemo, thank you for your time on TVC Breakfast.
Thank you for having me.
Of course, I have joining me public finance and policy analyst Olusegun Elemo. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. So, looking at the last economic management team headed by the Vice President Yemi Osinbajo, what would you say about the performance at the time?
Thank you once again for allowing me to join you. I think assessing the economic management team headed by the Vice President, my own assessment, looking at key economic indicators, you recall that under that same economic management team, the economy went into recession, And there've been lots of struggle with the economy, although there are other extraordinary factors that are not solely dependent on the Nigerian economic indicators that were responsible for those things. But I think it's been a cry from the general public, and strong voices on economic issues in the country, that an independent body such as been set up right now should have been set up long time ago. Perhaps if we had had that this kind of advisory council, perhaps the economy would have avoided recession.
Okay, so from the last economic council meeting, what lessons should this council learn from them? What's the take home?
Are you referring to the economic management team?
Yes.
Yeah, the lesson is that they should be objective. They should assess the situation, especially the key fiscal matters they will be advising the president on, the internal and external economic issues, and other areas their mandate cover. They should be objective. They have experience. They are, renowned economists. They are global quality people who have also, running successful businesses in their own, enterprises.
Okay. With their experience now, how will the experience come to bear in ensuring that all the advices will be taken and it will impact positively on this economy?
They have no authority whatsoever to make their advices count, or to force the president to yield to their advices. But they can leverage, like you mentioned, on their experiences by telling the president that, see, if you want to lift 100 million people out of poverty, like you mentioned, these are things that you need to focus on. If you want to drive down the unemployment rate that is currently at 23%, alarming, these are things you need to focus on. If you want to grow SMEs, you will need to find a way to drop the inflation rate to single digit. If you want the small-scale businesses to grow, we need to ensure that we reduce the interest rate and allow banks to lend to these small businesses. So those are some of the experiences I believe they will be able to leverage on and advising the president. But I just hope that there is a strong political will to this setting up of the advisory council. I really do hope so.
Well, political will is one thing. What about the president himself? And of course, he is the head of this council. Are you skeptical for the fact that this council might have a hard time getting to meet the president at some point with their recommendations?
Certainly, I envisage there will be hard times for them meeting the president. I mean, you will see the bureaucratic structure around the president in the last 4 years. You want to forecast, going forward, that things, even if it change, may not, change so quickly. So I hope that these people will be at liberty to do their work and to meet the president, it's stated in their mandate, quarterly and at request, so that in case of emergency, they can quickly, meet with the president and say, President, you need this fiscal policy. Of course, the central bank needs to continue with their own monetary policy, but the fiscal policies are also very, very important, and the advices from these council members, it will be very, very important to driving that forward.
All right, Olusegun Elemo, thank you so much for talking to us on this matter.